Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. I'm Catherine Brassell, and today I'm joined by one of the co-founders of Mamo Pay, Imad Gharazeddine. Going back to 2019, three friends left their full-time jobs to focus on Mamo Pay wholeheartedly. Today, they are a small and sweet team based out of the UAE, and we do have the pleasure of hearing from one of their co-founders. Mamo Pay really set out to solve a real-life problem, and that is to build a product experience unlike any other in the region. They offer a payments application designed to make money transfers accessible, enabling users to transfer funds quickly and seamlessly to friends and family. Thank you so much for joining us today, Imad. How have you been?
Been great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And how has the start to the year been for you guys?
It's been a very aggressive start. Everybody had a nice break over the holidays, and we're pumped and ready for 2022.
Well, I think let's get started and hear a bit more about you personally, your career journey, kind of where did it all begin? Take us back.
It all started in Montreal, Canada, where I studied software engineering. And then my first job, actually my first internship during my studies was at Google on an engineering team over there in California. One thing led to another with that internship. I ended up becoming a full-time engineer at Google. And then a few years later, I decided to make the move to Dubai, still with Google. And I ended up staying there for a good 8 years. Towards the end of that period, I would say I found myself in a position where I had experienced different types of teams and different types of roles and responsibilities at Google. And I felt that I was ready to start creating a lot more value and creating products that are going to help address very clear pain points that Asim and I were experiencing in the UAE market specifically. So shortly after that, we had several conversations. Obviously, being at Google was a very comfortable, nearly cushy job. It's just a very, as you can imagine, it's a great company to be in. But again, it's such a huge company that you don't really have that feeling where you're creating impact or making impact on the market and on users.
Okay, so take us back to when you co-founded Mamo Pay. I mean, how did you go about selecting the talent and the teams that you're going to be working with? We always love to kind of, get behind the minds of co-founders and founders and really get to the crux of that.
Yeah, so the way we do it today is a little bit different. It has matured quite a bit since the beginning, but I would say in the beginning we placed a lot of weight on the fact that we were all at Google at some point in our careers, and that was a very important way to attract really great talent. And our first employees who joined, they kind of banked on that, and they were impressed by that aspect of where we were and what we wanted to do. I think our vision and what we wanted to build and the way we were where we were thinking about going about it played a huge role in helping us attract talent, at least the first few hires at Mamo. But most of the hires came from like word of mouth referrals. It wasn't a very, how should I say, systematic process of recruiting.
Okay, yes, I can completely understand that. How would you say that Mamo Pay are kind of leading the way in terms of innovative solutions and obviously also off the back of a global pandemic? Yeah, it would be great to kind of unpack that with you.
Although we did start in and around COVID, I don't think the pandemic itself was that huge of a driver for us. It definitely helped a little bit because most industries, merchants, users started to demand more digital solutions, right, rather than offline, which is what we typically see here in the market. But I would say, COVID aside, even if it had never happened, which I'm sure everybody would be happy if that were the case. But COVID aside, I would say that the way business and payments are done in the UAE today there was a huge opportunity for improvement and an opportunity to mature the way that the market deals with these use cases. We noticed countless challenges, not just on the at the individual level. So Asim and I, for example, would constantly face challenges in dealing with money together as friends. But merchants and SMEs and freelancers in the market also have pain points that are actually much more severe than the pain points that people like you and I would experience.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. And I know Mamo Pay have, of course, got really ambitious growth plans this year. Can you walk us through that and really what that looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about towards the end of 2021. Yeah, we kind of took ourselves aside and tried to determine what does Mamo look like 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And the conclusion was that, as with every startup that is in our early stage, our mission as a startup is to find product market fit. We want to build solutions and products that address pain points of users and of SMEs in the region. And as long as we're able to get there, and as long as we're able to measure that and say that yes, we're on track to do that, I would say we're on a good track. Yeah. A big portion of this year is going to be spent on scaling the success we've seen last year. And when I say scaling, I don't just mean from a product or a technology point of view, but I also mean, how do we scale our operations? How do we scale our sales team? How do we scale our customer experience team? And do it in a way where we don't grow faster than our capabilities allow. So it's super important for us to have controlled growth yet aggressive growth. Yeah, there's a nice balance between growing too fast where your user suffers, and then growing too slow where you're just not growing as per expectations of the various stakeholders that are invested in us.
Let's talk a little bit about you personally, as a leader, as a co-founder. What is your kind of go-to leadership style? How are you driving performance at Mamo Pay and really sort of inspiring your team?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is where I would say the differences and dynamics between Asim and I are stark. We operate in very different ways, but at the same time, we both respect and appreciate the way we operate, because there are different strengths that surface from each of us, right? So the way he works rubs off on me, the way I work rubs off on him. We learn from each other, and then at the end of the day, you end up getting the best of both worlds. Yeah, so our style together combined, I would say, is empowering the team, employees at Mamo, to basically do the best work that they can with minimum distraction, minimum disruption. We have very minimal red tape. We're a very small team, so there's no hierarchy in that sense or in that regard. And what we like to do is break up our teams into very small squads, what we call them, which is a structure that's inspired by the Spotify model. If you've read about it online. So we have squads that handle different products or different features within products, for example, and these squads are equipped with all they need in terms of resources, both human and tech resources, to get the job done. So they don't need to rely on anybody else. They're fully functioning independent squads that can do what they need to do to help Mamo grow and build amazing products. So I would say, yeah, if to answer it in one word, I would say autonomy is a major aspect of our leadership style.
Thanks, Imad. And you spoke about scaling the success and obviously growing operational teams and scaling. What does that actually look like for Mamo Pay?
In terms of scale, as you know, in any startup, when you first start, you have to do things in a scrappy way. Yeah, you don't have the luxury of time where you can put together complicated and exhaustive systems that automate everything. So although we'd love to be there at some point, and we will be there at some point, how we like to work is in a very iterative manner. Yeah, so whether we're talking about writing code, designing products, or deploying a new structure of how customer support teams work. We do it in a very trial and error kind of way where we try things, learn from the mistakes, and then improve on that process. So today, for example, as we look about scaling sales and scaling operations and scaling customer support, what we do is we slowly add more resources to each team and then watch what happens. What kind of problems arise? How do we go about fixing those problems? And a lot of the time, we end up seeing that technology plays a very, very huge role in how we can streamline various departments at Mamo. So we do things as manually as possible until that process breaks, and then we solve it by adding technology and automation to the broken parts. So that's what we've been doing to date. I think our plans for the future and for geo expansion are definitely there, but we are very mindful of making sure that we have a fully functioning, robust operation in the UAE before thinking about kind of replicating that success in the new markets that we plan to cover.
We love to ask our guests a bit more about some of the trends that they are following closely within the market. Also, looking at some other companies that you might be watching. I know you mentioned Spotify, for example. What are some of those trends that you're following closely at the moment and that are getting you excited about in the market?
So there's a bunch of trends obviously happening, and oftentimes, especially in the past 2 years, you see trends come and go. For us, for example, blockchain and cryptocurrency is definitely a trend that we watch. Um, reg tech, regulatory tech. So how do we manage understanding the identity of our users so that we can protect them is something that is constantly evolving. We focus a lot on things like fraud detection, fraud prevention, because obviously we're a fintech, right? So we're being entrusted by users with something very, very valuable to them, which is their money and their savings. So a lot of the trends that we focus on are not trends that you would typically read about, on social media, but they are trends that happen behind the scenes and are relevant for fintechs to get their operations and their product done right. That said, I think our job is to create the trends rather than follow them. So what we're trying to do is really disrupt the standard way payments are being done in the region, in this very similar way that it's been done in other markets that are outside of MENA, for example.
I love that, creating the trends as opposed to following them. That's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, look, if you were kind of to look back, advice, a bit of advice for your younger self, in the fintech space, in the startup space, what pearls of wisdom would you impart? What knowledge would you impart on yourself, having been through this journey?
Oh, I ask myself that question every day, and we're constantly learning. As I mentioned before, I learn a lot from Asim. He learns a lot from me. I learn a lot from every single member of our team, and vice versa. One thing that I wish I did more of in my time at Google to help prepare me personally for the challenge of taking on a leadership role at Mamo is I wish I learned more how to be a better leader early on, even though I may not have been in a leadership position at Google all the time. It would be great, and I would advise anybody who's thinking about moving into startups, thinking about starting a startup, or thinking about moving jobs, doesn't really matter what your situation is. I would recommend that the best investment you can make today is in yourself and your personal development and professional development. It's not so much where you invest your money. The best thing you can invest in is yourself. So, how do you go about understanding psychology? How do you go about understanding leadership? How do you go about being able to relinquish control if you're if you're somewhat of a control freak? How do you give that away to the team that you've entrusted and hired so meticulously? These are all difficult things that we take for granted today, but I truly wish they were things that were taught in school, for example. So yeah, that's my advice for my younger self.
That's great. Thank you so much, Imad, for your time today. It really was a pleasure hearing more about the exciting journey that is Mamo Pay, and we really are going to watch you guys closely over the next few months and years, of course, and it'll be really exciting to see as things grow and expand and develop, and how you are really making things easier for your customer base.
We want to figure out what do customers actually want. From their feedback, it guides what we end up building. What I can say, I guess briefly, is we plan to serve not just the consumer community, but also the SME community. So that's kind of important.
Should any of our listeners like to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to get hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of us is probably through social media. On LinkedIn, we're pretty active on LinkedIn as a company. We're also active on Instagram. So anytime, feel free to reach out to us and myself, or just the Mamo page as well. We're very responsive there.
Great stuff. Thanks so much, Imad, and have an amazing day.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Please follow us on LinkedIn under Talent in the Cloud, or if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your FinTech team, or you yourself are looking for an exciting change in your career, please check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.